Starting right now. Call your friends. I'm just waiting for the room to get filled a little bit. We can't talk to 5 people. Call your friends. We're starting just now. It's a new series. We remember that the first series we looked at succeeding in your postgraduate studies. The second one we looked at building a successful academic career. Now the third series we're talking about becoming a professor. So today we'll talk about the different types of professorships. We'll answer questions that you've asked. We'll hone in on a few of those professorships together with Professor Linkabula. And next week, from next week, we'll start unpacking each one of them, telling you how you prepare yourself for them. We'll look at requirements for different universities and so on and so forth. I hope that works. I hope that works. Let's see how the room looks like. Okay, we've got close to 100 people on Twitter, on Instagram. Yes, also on Twitter and Facebookers. Tell us where you're joining us from. I can see someone joining us from Pretoria. Welcome. Welcome. UKZN alumni currently at Daystar University in Kenya. Welcome. Let's see, where do you come from? Andrew, welcome. I can see you. Tell us where you're coming from, and then I can welcome you properly. See people from Pretoria, people from UKZN. Is Vets PGA in the house? UWC is in the house. Welcome. We can see Bloemfontein in the house. Welcome. Johannesburg, UJ in the house. UP, University of Pretoria in the house. Welcome. University of Limpopo. We are so delighted to have University of Limpopo. For the first time today, we have University of Botswana joining us. Siamaila from UWC, welcome. University of Malawi is joining us today. Welcome. University of Namibia. Okay, UJ is a UJ student from from Namibia. And then we see Rhodes University is joining us on Twitter. Thank you so much for We're talking about a very interesting topic today, becoming a professor. Let's tell the truth. Everyone wants to be a professor. It's such a cool title. Everybody wants it. I mean, and you know, there's something about being a professor. The minute you say, I'm Professor so-and-so, people assume that you know everything. So if you don't know the answer for what they're saying, you speak softly, and they say, that's how professors are. She knows the answer, but she can't really explain it. So professors sometimes get away with that. UCT in the house, welcome. Lesotho joining us, welcome. So good to see you, so good to see you. I apologize if the network is playing up. Here's the thing. If you're on Facebook, network is playing up, check us on Twitter. If Twitter is giving up, check us on Instagram. Instagram is a place where you see both people talking. So move from one platform to the other if you're struggling with reception or with whatever. I'm on different networks in each of these devices that I'm on. I saw Trinity College Dublin, welcome. University of Fort Hare in the house, welcome. So there are different kinds of professorships. Everyone calls themselves professor, but it's not always that we are the same kind of professor. But also here's the thing. Other countries, I mean, in other countries like Portugal or Mozambique, Portuguese-speaking countries, the word for teacher is professore. So they call everyone who's a teacher a professor. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the hierarchy in university titles, right? So if you're in Mozambique, I'm not talking about the professores that you talk about who are teachers and so on and so forth. I'm talking about the hierarchy in universities. Now, different countries, of course, even within that hierarchy have different traditions. Here in South Africa, The hierarchies, academic hierarchies, start with junior lecturers, and then a lecturer, and then senior lecturer, and then associate professor, and then professor. Then I'll explain the others. But when you go to a country such as the US, you start with the title assistant professor. That's your initial title. You get your PhD, you get a job at a university, and your first title is assistant professor. So in the US, it is not unusual to find people insisting that you call them Dr. So-and-so, because there are many assistant professors who do not yet have a PhD. But it doesn't mean everyone who's called professor is an assistant. In the US, you have assistant professor, and then you have associate professor, and then you have full professor. Then the UK has got its own tradition. But I want to focus on the South African tradition, which is also common across the continent, or in many countries in the continent, particularly in the Southern African region. So, the academic track. In the academic track, as I said, we start with as lecturer, senior lecturer, associate professor, full professor. But of course, some universities also have a teaching track. So they have a research track that leads you to professorship. Then they've got a teaching track. Many universities have cancelled that. There used to be a teaching track where you don't necessarily become a professor. So you start with being a tutor, a senior tutor, and then a principal tutor. That's the last level. So I'm not talking about that, because there's a teaching track which many universities in South Africa have done away with, but it was an option for many universities in terms of who becomes a professor or not. But the confusing things, and I saw that many of you asked questions about people who don't have PhDs who are called professors. Now, here's the thing. Every university has got a right to bestow the title of professor on whoever they believe qualifies according to whatever criteria they have. And I'm saying whatever criteria because different universities use different criteria to endow people with the title of professor. So it's not the same criteria. It's different criteria for different universities. Some universities are much stricter than others. Some universities, it's easier to become a professor. Once you get a PhD, they already make you a professor. Now, if you don't have a PhD, it doesn't mean you cannot be a professor. Someone asked the question, can I be a professor without a PhD? Yes, you can. The question is, what kind of professor? Okay? The question is, what kind of professor? And today, I thought maybe I should start with that. I'm going to be talking to Professor Linkabula. We'll talk about those kinds of professorships where I want us to talk about honorary professorship, adjunct professor, professor extraordinaire, those kinds of professors that universities use, the titles that universities use to bestow on people who might not be academics, and we can unpack why that happens. But before I call Professor Linkabula on the screen, I want to answer a few questions that people ask. So Atite asked, how do I choose the title for my professorship? He says, I have degrees in 2 fields. Other than genomics, one is genomics, but research mostly in genomics and therapeutics of diseases. So the simple question is, if you have expertise in 2 fields, how do you choose your title of professor? Well, a professorship is not a qualification. It is an appointment. So it's a position. You get appointed into that position or you get promoted into that position. So it's not as if you decide, I'll be a professor of genomics, even though you are not appointed into that. You have to be appointed into that position. So a PhD you study towards, and it's a qualification, and you graduate on stage. A professorship, it is not a qualification that you study towards and you do not graduate. So it's a position that you get promoted into or you get appointed into. So it is not your choice. You would have applied for that position. Either it's a position advertised to be professor of genomics, and then you apply for it, and then you get that professorship. You are professor of genomics. And this is the reason why, if you are appointed as a professor, like I'm professor of mathematics education, besides being vice chancellor, I'm a full professor of mathematics education. That is another position that I'm appointed into. I can hear you ask, but how? Well, I've got two positions. One is vice chancellor, the other one is full professor of mathematics education. It is possible to get a person who's a vice chancellor but doesn't have another position, as they are not appointed to an academic position. The academic position, the appointment of an academic position gets evaluated by the faculty, and the faculty decides whether you qualify for that appointment or not. The vice chancellorship is a different selection committee. It's not a faculty specific, it's institutional, and it's managed by council. So that's why these two are separate positions, right? So I can't tomorrow decide that I'm professor of string theory, even though I'm not appointed to that. It doesn't matter how much I think I know about string theory. I am not appointed to being professor of string theory. I'm appointed to being professor of mathematics education. So that's how it is. So you don't choose Atite, you get appointed into. All right? Sipua asked, what does a person need to do to get the professor title? I've already said you don't study towards it. It's about the work that you have done, the work that you have done as a scholar, all right? As a researcher, as an academic, you do research work, you do teaching, you do social responsiveness work or community engagement work, as they call it in other universities. You get, and there's a criteria, as I said, different universities have got different criteria, and you can get promoted into that. But sometimes it is not because of your promotion within a university, it's because of the work that you have done as an expert in your field, which might not be academic. It may be business, it may be, in the law, maybe you are a judge, or whatever field that you are in, that you become an expert in, whether it's social justice, whatever it is, if you become an expert in, and a university feels that they want to bestow upon you that professorship, they can do that, and it will be with a particular discipline. When they say to you, we are appointing you to be a professor of law in our university because you've been a judge for so many years, you've practiced as an advocate, you've done distinguished work. You may not even have a master's degree. It doesn't matter. If we as a university are convinced that your experience is suitable for us to bestow you with that position, we can do that, right? So it's not a qualification. Biggs asked, please explain the different types of professors. We're going to do that with Professor Lenkabula just now. And Loazi asked, please touch on the honorary professorships. We will do that today, because today I want us to focus on those professorships that you don't, honorary, adjunct, and so on, that you don't necessarily have to be appointed by the university. Smanga asked, please cover the honorary doctorate as well. How far does its recognition extend? We're talking about professorships. At the end, I'll talk a little bit about honorary doctorates, because I see that you want to hear about that, Smanga. And the producer asked, please contextualize the generic and specific requirement, expectations, and obligations of any professorial titles like doctor and professor. By the way, these two titles, as I said, are different. Doctor, you study for. You get your PhD, or your doctor of education, or doctor of philosophy, or whatever it is. A professorship, you get promoted into. So, if you're a professor of mathematics education like myself, right? Let's just say tomorrow I decide I'm sick and tired of academia, I'm leaving, I'm going to work for Clicks. All right? Let's just say I say I'm leaving this, I'm going to work for Clicks. Right? I'm no longer in academia. And no university appoints me as extraordinaire or honorary. I get out. I still go out with my PhD. But I cannot, whilst working for Clicks, call myself a professor, because I don't have the professorial position. Even though I spent the last 30 years of my career with the professor title, if I resign and go and work for Clicks, even if I'm CEO, I cannot call myself professor, because I am not a professor anymore. I don't have the position, right? I can call myself a doctor. Why? Because that's my qualification. It is not a position, right? So there's a difference between doctor and professor. So it's not the same. You leave university, you stop calling yourself a professor, unless some university says, Professor Phakeng, even though you're no longer at the university, you're at Clicks, we recognize your skill, we want to appoint you as an honorary professor. And then, because they've appointed me as honorary professor, there's a documentation, then I can call myself Professor Phakeng again, right? Honorary professorships usually have a term. It is not lifetime. We will talk with Professor Lenkabula about emeritus professor also, that is lifetime. I want to call in Professor Lenkabula, who is a deputy vice chancellor at the university scholar. Those of you who are doing work in feminism or women's studies would know her work. She is very well known. I have so much respect for this woman, and I'm really delighted that today she's agreed to speak with me. Pule, good to have you. Welcome and hello. Can you hear me? Pule can't hear me. Professor Lenkabula? Professor Lenkabula is frozen. Can you hear me? All right. Pule can speak, so I'm gonna drop her. I'll try her again. All right. I'll try her again later so that we don't lose the time. Pule is not managing to get in contact. We'll try again. Pule, I don't know if it's your network. Please try again. Let me go back to explaining then the professorships that I was talking about, and then we will get Pule online. Professor Lenkabula from University of the Free State, amazing fellow woman scholar, and we will talk with her about the different professorships. Now, remember I said assistant professorship is a title in the US, and typically is the first step. It's the lowest level when you get into academia in the US. Now, Professor Lenkabula is here. We're going to try again. Go live with Professor Lenkabula. Now, we're going to talk about adjunct professor. With Professor Lenkabula, I want us to start with explaining what is an adjunct professor. Puleng, how are you? We can't see you. Now we see your wall. Hello, Puleng. I can see many people want to be professors. That's a brilliant dream. So we're going to talk about different. Puleng, I want us to start with adjunct professor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Khati. Can you see me? Hello?
I can see you. I can see you keep freezing, but I can hear you now.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I think I'm delighted that you have elaborated on the different aspects of professorship, including at least the 10 criteria or the 10 types of professorship. And thank you for reminding academics or aspiring academics that once you've left the academy and you don't have any appointment with any academic institution, it's not good etiquette to continue using the title. I think as you stated, it's always important to be aware that we have associate professorships, full professors who are really through the criteria of teaching and learning, their research outputs, books, publications, inventive aspects such as intellectual property, whether it's geographic indications, patents, and so on and so forth. Those are the two aspects of professorship that I think are quite appreciated.
Wow,
however,
I don't want us to lose.
I'm not creating a hierarchy, but I'm just saying it's positions that at least in terms of your output, your inventions, your engagement, in terms of scholarship of engagement, and so on. That, at least in universities in South Africa, in the United Kingdom, as well as in the European Commission countries, those are the two distinctive ones that are based on the outputs. However, as you stated, there would be adjunct professors, which would be individuals that have done well in the world of work, whether it's in corporate, civil society, or in the NGO sector. And these people
Yeah.
would be invited to share.
Puleng, you're cutting again. So you're cutting again. You're getting frozen.
Some of the advantages or areas of development of being based in the farms. Hello?
Yes. The disadvantage of the advantage of being based in the farm of the Free State is that the quality of life is better, right? Because of the
Yes, it is. Yes, yes.
but then network can be dodgy. But I
It
don't
is.
want us to stop this because I really appreciate how you're explaining them. Let's go to the adjunct professorship one, because that's what people, I saw the comments on Twitter and many people were confused about that one, right? So I want us to explain again the adjunct professor. So it can be someone in corporate, someone in any other professional field, not academia, who we call into academia to teach courses to our students, or maybe one or two, they are not full-time staff, they are adjunct. We invite them because of their expertise, right? Pule? We can give you examples of outstanding adjunct professors. I mean, Ntate Bonang Mohali is an adjunct professor at UJ, and is an outstanding businessman, celebrated, highly achieved. And UJ, as they were starting their business school, they got him to be an adjunct professor at UJ. He doesn't have to work for them. He doesn't need to work for them. They recognize his skill and expertise in business, and then they recruited him to be an adjunct professor. Puleng?
Yes, you are right. My university, the University of the Free State, for instance, has a chancellor who's also an adjunct professor, somebody
That's
who's
the one.
highly esteemed in the business, Mr. Bonang Mohali.
Yeah.
For many people don't know. But you have many other universities that would take people who have invented something outside the university and involve them in their research and development positions as adjunct professors. And they may come once in a while to interact and engage with researchers or with undergraduate students. I apologize
Yes. So if you are out
network.
for a network, that's okay. So if you are out there, you don't want to be in academia, if you become really distinguished in your field, it is very possible that a university can ask you to be adjunct, or they ask you to come give occasional lectures. That's how you become adjunct, because they ask you to give occasional lectures, they go great, students love them, and then the university says, can we appoint you as an adjunct professor? Because they want you to occasionally come and give those lectures. Oftentimes, adjunct professors are not paid. Adjunct professors are not paid. They're actually offering their expertise in giving these lectures, interacting with students for free. We gave an example with Bonang, who's very generous with his knowledge and expertise. Interestingly, as I said, Puleng, he's an adjunct professor at UJ, but he is chancellor at UFS.
I know. I needed to use that as an example. But as you state, somebody like there are many other adjunct professors, and in the media, sometimes we ask why do they call themselves professors? But it's precisely because of their sterling work in different areas of their expertise. And I think we shouldn't confuse them with the academic professors, but we should acknowledge that the scholarship of engagement from their disciplines is what makes them to be recognized and be appreciated for really steering forward a sense of knowledge in the area or in the particular discipline.
Great. Puleng, I want us to move to the second title, which is also sometimes confusing, right? It's not people, it's a title that's given to people, title professorship that's given to people who don't work for the university, just like the adjunct professorship. So there is a honorary professor. So you can be appointed as you can be given a title of honorary professor in a particular discipline, a particular university. you don't work for them, it's an appointment. Can you explain that one to our viewers?
I've observed that many universities, whether the University of Toronto, where I've had the opportunity to to work at Emmanuel College, they identify distinguished individuals who who have a doctorate, who in their work have either discovered something phenomenal that had not been discovered, or have a great invention that has never been thought out, or they would have been resilient and overcame certain aspects in their lives and yet pushed a particular theory. Because oftentimes we think of the natural sciences as the arena where we are able to give clearer examples. But in the social and humanities, you may find somebody with a doctorate who is the leader, for instance, of the United Nations AIDS, and then you find that such a person is bestowed with an honorary professorship. And this is primarily because of their global impact and recognition that their work spans sometimes beyond disciplinary boundaries, but also it's changing the dynamics of knowledge production and its dissemination in the world, not just in the local context.
Yeah, that's good. But you can also be given the honorary professorship even as an academic. I mean, I recall when I left Wits University to go and work at UNISA, Wits University appointed me as an honorary professor.
Yes, because they did not want to lose the distinctive work and distinction that you would have made, and still want the association with your name. So yes, I think it's important to note that, but I've observed that in the context of South Africa, in Europe, we bestow people with the honorary professorship because they've become sites of excellence, such that an association with them is quite important in inspiring undergraduate students, postgraduate students, including those alumni who may still want to use, especially in the context of the knowledge economy and the new digital platforms or digitalization that requires rethinking of knowledge all the time. So it's quite important. There are few academics or even individuals that get the honorary professorship. And I think it's something that we should also highlight so that emergent academics, established academics can always aspire to reaching those heights where all universities want association with them.
Yeah. So a university, so you can't give it to yourself. You can't say I'm an expert in my field, and so and I studied at TUT, so I'm an honorary professor too. You can't do that, ladies and gentlemen.
No. The criteria is that distinction in the work that people do, and in ensuring that also it's not just me as an individual, that the social impact is quite rigorous.
Yeah. So, and every university has got a process. There's usually a policy for appointment to being an honorary professor. So there will be a selection process, a judgment process, and a decision made, and then a letter written to you. And often there's also a term, like for example, Wits had appointed me for 3 years as an honorary professor. When that 3 years ended and I was supervising students, doing sessions, seminars and guest lectures, and then they renewed it for another 3 years. So I had 6 years, and then we ended it after 6 years. But the issue is that the university wants association with you, because association with you gives them a good name. Association with you because of your achievements, whether it's with inventions, whether it's with a particular area of knowledge that you've crafted your expertise in, right? So you may be in academia in another university, or you may be in business. It can be either way. Oftentimes, honorary professors supervise students, and they do. It's mainly about research. Adjunct professors is mainly about teaching. But honorary professorship is mainly about research and so they will do much more. They may teach as well, but they will do mainly research with it. Some universities would say, if we appoint you as an honorary professor, we expect you to publish at least 1 paper or 3 papers for us per year in our name. Some universities would do that. Some universities do not do that. Right?
Yes, yes. Or they could call them the fellows, you know. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, the fellowship is interesting because, some universities will call you fellows. We at UCT have got a college of fellows, which is another process where people get admitted into being fellows, into members of the College of Fellows. Yeah, it's a different. It's like you have to be really distinguished and so on and so forth. It's another process that's. We're not talking about that today, right? And the fellowships, we'll talk about that another time. We'll have a session to talk about that because these are hierarchies in academia.
Yeah.
So the honorary professors, guys, is something that you can aspire towards. Now, I want us to talk about this people who are in the borderline. So there are people who distinguish themselves in their fields. They especially, and I'm going to go for judges in particular. We have some people at UCT who've been judges, right? They've enormous amount of experience. They've worked in the field. They've been advocates, whatever. And then, boom, they become a professor. They might not have a PhD, but we as universities appoint them full time to be academics. So they get onto our books and they get a salary, and we actually rush to get them. All right. You want to talk to that, Puleng?
I think that's a practice that universities have always worked with. I remember that there were many in Wits University, at the University of South Africa, but also all over. These are distinguished. We recognize the work that they've done. We recognize that by employing them within university, they may share their experience, or they may actually hone and write and have the opportunity to now reflect, write, and produce even more knowledge, and also to mentor and supervise. In this instance, because they have a master's degree, some of them have a PhD, you then create an environment where collaborative work enables them to still form part of panels of supervision or panels of writing or of research areas. And I think this is the appointment that the former public protector, Ms. Thuli Madonsela, or Advocate Madonsela, has been appointed at the University of Stellenbosch. So this is also an equally important professorship within the university system, because it allows knowledge that has been honed in the world of work, the expertise, but also to give people the opportunity to document, to put it in writing, to rethink, and to ensure that they don't just practice, but practice and theory interface with each other. And they can also reflect on those aspects that they have changed, either jurisprudence or knowledge, or even inventions, if there's any reassessment of such.
Yeah, great. I'm glad that you mentioned Thuli Madonsela, because her appointment is exactly one of those where a university recognizes the possibility of benefiting from an experience of someone who served as a public protector for many years, right? You can't get that from any degree. You can't get that from any degree. Not only does the person come with experience of being a public protector, but they come also with networks, with all sorts of value to the university. Sometimes they may even end up their position paying for itself because they are so networked, right? But university, and things are like that because universities are sites of knowledge. We are a place of ideas. We chase people who we think will inject new ideas, new ways of thinking, of doing things. We can pull them into the university and give them a special place. And that's what Thuli Madonsela That's the kind of professorship that Thuli Madonsela has. It doesn't mean that the person might not do a PhD.
Yes.
They might still choose to do a PhD. All right, they
Definitely.
might still choose to do a PhD, but it's not a requirement, it's not a qualification for them to be appointed to that position.
Definitely.
Oftentimes, people like those, many universities want them. The person retires, whether it's the Auditor General or the Public Protector or the Chief Justice, people like those, because of the experience, universities will want them. Only one university can have them, and then they will appoint them. And of course, and people talk and say, oh, wow. Guys, we want the experience, and they publish and they end the university the prestige that they deserve, right?
Yes.
Well, and there's also, can we talk about something that people don't know is this. I said I'll clue people into secrets.
Yes.
Here's something that people don't know, right? So some universities have a practice of when you get a position like head of school or dean or deputy vice chancellor or vice chancellor, even if you haven't qualified to be professor, they give you the title of professorship by virtue of the position. Yes. Yes. There are universities that, it's not all universities. We don't do that at UCT. Other universities do that. So you find that someone comes from elsewhere, they were not a professor, they might not even, sometimes they don't even have a PhD. They get appointed to be head of school, boom, they get the title of professor, right? And then people then squabble about that one. Do you want to explain about that one, Pule?
Yes, I think when we started, I said there are at least 10 definitional dimensions of professor. So you would find these ones who are administrative professors. And I often say it's best to hold on to your doctoral title in that regard. However, because it's a formal title that is granted. And I think this is more a practice with American universities. And I see that in the context of South Africa, there are some universities that are using it. I think Northwest University, for instance, has used it for people who may not have necessarily been academics, but who may have been in academic administration.
That's used it as well That's used it as well for many years. I think it stopped at some stage during Adam's time, but that's also had it.
Yes.
That you become a professor because you are a head of school, not necessarily because you have any. So they would recruit someone who's got administrative expertise, who'd be a brilliant teacher. I mean, if you remember, Mary Metcalf had been MEC, had extensive experience in education, and then Vets recruited her to be head of school. She doesn't have a PhD, but because of her extensive experience in education, Vets offered her to be head of school. And at that time, the title of head of school came with the professor title. And so she was called professor without a PhD, right? It wasn't because she's got research, it was because of her administrative experience in education and the value that you bring into the university in terms of running the school of education. So you get those kinds of different.
And the policy making experience, I think, also added on to, because as much as such individuals would not have been in the academy, they understand or have somewhat an aerial view of the educational systems, the policy systems that have been put in place, the areas of development that may require attending to, including research sites or research areas or research niche areas that have not been attended to. So in that way, it's really administrative. But as I said, my own preference is that there must be a certain criteria that is undergirded of research, of engaged scholarship, as well as of some semblance of teaching, in order to ensure that countries such as ours, where a majority of professors from the margins still require ensuring that we don't lose sight of the imperative to publish, to research, to mentor, and to ensure that the supervision processes are entailed. So I'm more I prefer that even with the academic administrators that are professors, there should still be an invitation towards researching, towards publication, and towards mentorship of undergraduate or postgraduate students, more postgraduate students in particular.
Agreed. Agreed. You see, but there's a prerogative of universities. Here's the thing that people, we already said, if you have the professor title, if you leave the university, you lose the title. You go and work at Clicks, you lose the title, finished, right? But here's the thing I've always said to people, when we count, I mean, people normally say there are so many professors in the university, in the country. And I say to them, you know, as much as that tells us something, there's a lot that it doesn't tell us because criteria is so different. So there are many people at UCT who would be professors just by walking into a university, and they may not even be senior lecturers. They may be lecturers, but they can walk to another university and become a full professor because the criteria is so different, right? So the criteria of being professor is different. And I have seen situations where someone moves from one university being a professor, they go to another university, and that university says, no, you don't even qualify to be an associate professor. We will give you a senior lecturer position, take it or leave it. And some people still take it because they want to be in that university. So don't mix these things. Professorships are limited to a particular university. You might move and the rank might go down because the criteria is different, right?
Definitely.
So yeah, but also the thing that I don't want us to get confused about is that because I saw the shading on Twitter that it is not unusual for someone to be appointed as a professor when they don't have a PhD or they don't have experience of teaching. I hear Puleng says it's important that you give people come with experience, agreed, but it's not unusual that we'll have administrative professors and professors who come with experience, other experience rather than academic experience, and they start building their academic. They are very interesting people. We have Judge Denise Davis, who's experienced. I mean, and I think, where would you get such experience in academia? It is not possible that you'd have someone being an academic and getting that experience, being all the time as an academic and having that experience, building it all at the same time. You can only have that person building it as a judge in the legal field and then coming into academia and then that. So it's a very interesting thing, the creating space for people from outside. Puleng?
However, I love the French system because the French system requires you. Normally in the French system, anyone who is a teacher is referred to as a professor. However, if you want to be an academic professor, you have to present, just like you would in your PhD, you have to present a motivation around what you've contributed to the knowledge production, how it influences the discipline or multidisciplinarity. And then that panel can determine whether you are a professor or you still need to work on being a professor. I think that one provides credence because there wouldn't be contestations or even what you refer to as shading, because the criteria is clear, the standards are clear, the outputs are clear, or even the social impact. So such a criteria, I think if we were to look at the French university systems, whether it's in Senegal or in France or in other areas that associate with the French system, I think it allows that excitement. Somebody like Professor Mafeje, for instance, prior to his professorship being confirmed in the Netherlands, it had to go to all the universities in the Netherlands, and all the social sciences departments or faculties gave it a thumbs up. So I think as part of enriching the South African higher education system, it may also be a fantastic idea to ensure that we create a semblance of nominal standards or nominal criteria for defining who is a professor, not as a sense of gatekeeping, but as a sense of creating a standard in order to ensure that our own higher education system is comparable, it's competitive globally, but also when professors from South Africa go anywhere in the world, they are comfortable in their skin that they can compete, compare, or even produce better knowledge than those who come from so-called Ivy League universities anywhere else in the world.
Puleng, it's interesting you're saying that, because someone would argue we in South Africa have a rating system, and some people have argued that the rating system is one of those criteria that can be applied across, and some universities use it to judge whether people are ready to be professors or not. So I don't think it's without, and we know the problematics of the rating system. That's not what we're talking about. But I'm talking about what they're doing in the Netherlands. Can be argued to be similar, because you send your credentials and they get looked at by different people, and the subjectivity in that process cannot be denied. And as you can see in the country, we've got other people being rated, other people not being rated. And I'm sure in the Netherlands there are people who query the fact that their credentials went around, they didn't get the professorship, even though they deserved it. So we have an autonomous system where each university decides what qualifies as a professor for them, which whatever, but we have a universal system of rating which is optional. Personally, I think it's problematic for a university to use the rating system as criteria. I think it's problematic, but there are many universities that use it. But I also know that as an individual, you would apply for a rating because it is your quick way to tell the doubting Thomases in your promotions committee that you are worth what you are saying you want to be promoted to. So if you are smart, you apply for a rating because you think these people in your university, they're subjective, they've got politics against you, the rating will show them out, you know? So it gives you that possibility, but it's not necessarily the thing that gets you promoted.
I think it's quite important for those who feel it's imperative to test their ideas within the rating system to go for it. And as you say, it's important because it validates the prowess of a particular individual on their scholarship or its impact or its implication for the knowledge arena or even for society. I, however, am not a great supporter of the rating system, yet I cannot encourage people not to follow it, because I think for us in our country, where Black people in particular have just, majority of them joined the university, it's always important to test yourself with your peers and competitors, if there are any competitors. I don't think people get into the academy to compete as it is to edify themselves, to contribute knowledge, and to do well. So on the one hand, I think our system of rating is really validating the quality of scholarship that derives or ensues from South Africa. But it also enables us to separate the idea of emerging scholars and established scholars in terms of the criteria that is developed. I think it's also a good idea in ensuring that scholarship, people feel content in themselves in the work that they do. For those who are not proponents of ratings, they may say the criteria that is used hinges towards publications, but what if there is more social impact in the work that I do, in the advocacy of particular issues, or if I have many inventions and patents that I'm not interested in ranking. So I always say what you have said is quite important, Khethi, because you're saying it's quite important because it projects the work that you do, it validates the work that you do, it validates a scholar as.
But it cannot be used for promotion. I don't think
it
should be a criteria. I don't think it should be a criteria.
Yes, it could be an add-on. It's like when we say this is a required criteria and a recommended criteria. It gives you an edge in the sense that it's just recommended. If you have it, then that we don't have to do a little bit more work to satisfy ourselves that you'll be a good professor. I like the idea.
And I like the fact that it's optional. It's not
Yeah,
compulsory.
yeah,
So you
yeah,
choose to do that. But you talked
Mm-hmm.
about the late entry of us as Black people. It's interesting because for me, as a Black
Mm-hmm.
African, South African woman who is
Mm-hmm.
small and puts on lipstick, the applying for an
I do
NRF rating was
lipstick too.
very applying for an NRF rating was very important because I
Mm-hmm.
knew. I mean, I'm older than you, so I got in ahead of you, right? I
Yeah.
knew that nobody would believe that I have the
Mm-hmm.
credentials that I have if I don't
Mm-hmm.
apply for a rating. So I kept
Mm-hmm.
pursuing the rating because I wanted it to announce me.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, you get pushed from pillar to post. Nobody believes that you're a scholar that you are, and nobody has got the time to look at your CV or your citations at a
Yeah.
go. Because you are Black. You
Mm-hmm.
see, because
Yeah.
precisely because I'm Black, getting a rating was very important. Controversial as it is, subjective as it is, I thought I'm going for it. So that when I argue that I deserve this, then I can say people around the world are telling you that you are missing out.
Fantastic, Khetty. Precisely because you pushed the boundaries. I didn't feel I needed to be validated by the ratings because I felt if universities all over the world are comfortable with inviting me to come and teach, to do sessions, to research, to collaborate, then and also there are people like you who are pathfinders, Professor Mutluatsi, yourself, Rampeller, and others. I felt I don't need to validate myself through this system. It's a good system, but I think I trust the contribution of my knowledge because here is University of Toronto inviting me. Yonsei University says there's something that you're writing about that's interesting about ecology, economy, and feminist ethics. So I'm thinking, yeah, Khetty has already done it. She has demonstrated that it's possible to get a B rating, A rating, to do well, to push all the boundaries. I don't have the I don't have the burden of being a pathfinder. I have the burden of ensuring that the size of doing well, of success, or what is called excellence is accomplished. And I think
absolutely
it may be important, though, also for emerging scholars not to just feel comfortable because the doors have been open. They must also strive to ensure that their scholarship is not just limited to South Africa, that those of you and those who came before you who have opened the doors, whether as professors, academic professors, as distinguished researchers that you are, maintain that high standard so that the idea of Black professors is not seen as though it's a reduction of excellence, it's tokenism, or it's absurdity. I think it must be a reaffirmation that whether Black women professors are rated or whether they opt not to be rated, they aspire to ensure that success, impact, excellence, in quotes, I don't believe in the word excellence, but to make sure that I communicate with your audience. That's what I can say. Really to ensure that we do not minimize and trivialize the scholarship of Black women professors. It doesn't mean we should minimize anyone's professorship, but I think many Black women have been at the cold face of being trivialized, their work being invalidated, and sometimes in the publics and not necessarily in the academic arena. And when you made, for instance, the example of Professor Metcalfe, at no point has Professor Metcalfe's professorship been questioned, but your professorship, Thuli Madonsela's
professorship is questioned.
are
Exactly. I mean, it's a good example. Thuli's professorship is questioned, but the other Mary's is not questioned because of that. Puleng, you know, I love talking with you. Can we do it again next week so that we talk about the other professorships?
Thank you. We'll definitely make time. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Khetty. I didn't say I'm a professor of ethics. I'm a feminist. I'm at the
Yes.
University of the Free State. I really
Yes.
love being in the center of the country. So thank you very much for inviting me.
I told them a little bit before you came, and I said, whoever is doing work on feminism or women's studies, they would know you. But I mean, I'm glad that you explained that. But I also told them how much I love your brain, your way of thinking, and who you are. That we work together at UNISA, and it's really good to have you in the business. So we'll talk again next week, Puleng. We're going to go on with the other professorships. I'm going to use the last few minutes. I'm going to say goodbye to you and use the last 3 minutes to talk about honorary doctorates. But thank you so much. Have a good evening, Puleng.
Thank you, Katie. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Chat next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right. That was such an excellent conversation. Professor Linkabula is always good sports. I mean, such a scholar. Really, really love her. She's up there on my list of favorite women, together with Pumla Kola and others. So I want to finish off this session. This is not part of what we're talking about. Okay, let me say to you, next week, we're going to be talking about other professors. Today, we covered adjunct professors, we covered honorary professorships, and we covered the professors who get appointed to universities, but they haven't been academics. They just come into academia and their first title is professorship. We gave you a few examples and we argue that they bring value, right? Next week, I want us to talk about today we also talked about administrative professors, the ones who get the title because they've been appointed to some administrative position, whether DVC or dean. They were not professors and suddenly they become a professor because of the position, the administrative position. Next week, we'll talk about emeritus professor. We'll talk about some universities have a title professor extraordinaire. Some universities, we're also going to talk about distinguished professorship, and we'll talk about visiting professors. All right, we'll talk about those 4 titles tomorrow. They are different. Different universities use them for different reasons. So join us again next week. Before I go, someone asked about honorary doctorates. Said, and the person said, how far does it go in its recognition? So here it is. An honorary doctorate is a recognition of your excellence, whatever area that is, right? Different universities have got different criteria and different processes to agree or to decide to give someone an honorary professorship. Some universities, there's an honorary professorship that gets approved by Senate, all right? Because it's a recognition of your academic work, outstanding work in academia, right? And then if it's a recognition of your outstanding work in other areas, professional fields or whatever, it doesn't go through Senate, it goes through council, right? So you've got these 2 streams. For example, that's what we have at UCT. But in all universities, an honorary doctorate is given to someone that the university believes that they deserve that recognition, that we as a university want to give this doctorate to you because of the work that you have done, your standing in your field, that we believe that you qualify, that you have the same, we would see you in the same way we see people who get this doctorate in our university, even though you didn't study with us towards a PhD. Did you get that? So we say, we believe that you deserve this because you, in our view, we see you as the same people who would get the same doctorate. Procedures are different. With honorary doctorates, the university wants to be associated with you, your name, your good work, and that's why it goes that way. Can you use it for a job? Not really, but it is possible that in a job, they will see you in a particular light if a university is giving you an honorary doctorate, because they might say it's not trivial. It's like getting an award, right? It's not trivial. It's quite substantial that a university decided to give you an honorary doctorate. So you cannot say, I'm not going to do a PhD. I'll just wait for someone to give you an honorary degree. That's not a wise move. If you want to be an academic, you must do a PhD. And there are people who have an honorary doctorate, but they still pursue PhD studies. They've got more than one honorary doctorate, but they still want to get a PhD that they studied for, that they earned, right? So if you want to be an academic, go ahead and do a PhD. All right. I want to stop here today. I think we had a wonderful, wonderful conversation with Professor Lenkabula. I'm going to talk to her again next week. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. Vets PGA, University of Limpopo, Mpumalanga University, Rhodes, UWC, UCT, UJ, University of Pretoria, everyone in Cyprus, in Russia, in Slovenia, in Dublin, Trinity College Dublin, who joined us today. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you again next week. So let me say goodbye to people on Twitter first. Twitter, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having you. All right, let's log off there. And thank you so much on Instagram for joining us. We'll see you again next week, same time.